All right, it's on recording. So, hello everyone. So generally, I'm the master of Zoom, but I am tonight. I am not tonight. That is Joseph. So he has all the power. Um, but welcome everyone. Those who don't know me, I'm Jervis or Jay Johnson, one of the co-founders of this meetup. I think we're in our fourth year, Ron and Gopal. So we have some of the leaders of our meetup today, Ron, Gopal, Joseph, and I don't know if anyone else is on. I'm going to introduce them. Oh, Alexander's on. Let's see who else is on. Christine, I'm just going through the police. All right, cool. All right, so we will record this session, and we will put it out on our YouTube site. So this is, we've kind of made it global now, our meetup, because we've had a lot of global representation since we started in that Reflect 2020 event, which was global. And Joseph and I now live in Carmel, Indiana, and then Ron lives he sort of lives in Seattle and sort of lives in San Francisco Bay Area. And Gopal lives in San Francisco Bay Area. We have a couple other people that live in San Francisco Bay Area and Phoenix that have kind of helped started this. But now we're much more global, so we kind of changed the name. And we're going to continue to have these sessions. Our next session will be Sally Ilata, and she's from the Agile Health Radar. That's what I think they changed her name. But I know her for a while, but she's going to speak to us next. But we're going to continue our community, and anyone that has any ideas or anything or any subject they want to talk about on the Agile Enterprise. We focus on Agile Enterprise, big companies, Agile, and I don't care, change, digital, whatever you try to do in big companies. It's a little bit difficult, more difficult, I would say, than medium or smaller size companies, just because of the scale and the number of people, right? So that's what we focus on. So with that said, I'll now introduce one of our co-leaders here, Gopal. And Gopal will introduce our fabulous speaker today that's going to help us understand change management. Anytime we do Agile Transformation, digital transformation, or whatever, we change, that's change in a company, and it's change about people, and then it's hard, right? So Gopal, I will now turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jay. I am super excited today about this presentation. This is one of the toughest things in a transformation. I mean, we were just talking about it before, as we were getting ready for this call. People think change is easy, but change is one of the toughest things, and change is constant as well. And I'm really, as I said, super excited about April coming in and sharing her nuggets of wisdom with us. Really thank you, April, for spending your time with us. I know you've got your family commitments and everything, but really appreciate you spending time with us. A few words about April, and then I will hand it over to her. She is author of a book called Ready, Set, Change. It's the #1 bestseller in Amazon. If you haven't seen it or haven't read it, I would suggest you pick up a copy. What this book has is the practical guidelines, methodologies, tools that you can use in a change management setting. So April is definitely going to talk more about it, what is in there, and some of the nuggets of wisdom, as I mentioned. In addition to that, April also runs what is it called, a collaboration network in the Midwest. She's also the president of the Michigan Change Management chapter, and she's one of the first CCMP, the change management professional, certified change management professional, which is certified by the ACMP as well. So without further ado, April, thank you so much. Please take it away.
Sure, thank you, Gopal. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and I'm really pleased to join you tonight or this afternoon, wherever you are. So let me just share my screen. For some reason, we're trying this new view in Zoom. So Ron can hook you up with this. But if you have the new version of Zoom, you're able to now have your PowerPoint sort of as a PDF behind you. So that's kind of interesting. So I might move myself around a little bit. We'll give it a try. I wanted to talk a little about organizational change management because I truly think this is one of the power skills for project management professionals. So just a little bit about my background. I'm a certified change management professional. I'm also a project management professional, PMP, and I've spent more than 20 years leading change in projects, leading organizational change on large projects for large organizations like the state of Michigan, the University of Michigan, which is a Big Ten university. I have had healthcare experience, government experience, and higher ed experience. And so when I was beginning my change management career, I had been in, I had a master's in organizational communications, and I had specialized in training and development. And I started being very interested in change management. And I was hired by the University of Michigan to work in their, work on a large enterprise project for them and lead one of the many work stream, one of the many functionality implementations, lead the organizational change management effort for that. So then I moved into, we founded an association in 2011. A group of individuals founded the Association of Change Management Professionals, ACMP. And at that time, I joined as a founding member, and I assisted in developing the global standard for change management, which is what the CCMP certification is based on. So I have a lot of depth in that, and I wanted to share some what I think are kind of the pieces that you really need to know to be able to be effective and to successfully lead change, and to use organizational change management as like kind of a power skill or a power tool in your project management toolbox. So I wanted to start with a definition, because I think it's important that we have some way of ensuring that we know what we're talking about. And the way that we define organizational change management is that it's a transitional process moving an organization and its stakeholders from the current state to a future state. So it sounds like a very simple explanation, very simple definition, right? Moving an organization and its stakeholders from the current state to the future state. And yet it's not that simple. You know, moving people, which are stakeholders in an organization, from where they are to where we need them to be is a really tough thing sometimes. So in that standard for change management, we identified this is what we call change management, moving that organization and stakeholders. Agile organizational change management integrates interactions, tools, and processes to leverage the mindset, focusing on sponsorship and stakeholder adoption. So it's kind of even a little bit more of capturing that thought of the mindset is incredibly important to change, right? It can't just be a tool or a technique, but there's a mindset shift that stakeholders need to adopt to be able to adopt change. And that's the goal, is to help stakeholders adopt change. So let's see, not used to this diagram. So this is our change curve. And I want to show this to you because I think this is incredibly important. You see here, we have two axes, right? We have the performance on this, and we have time over here. Now, what this is showing, and this is from the Association of Change Management Standard for Change Management, when we have a change implemented, we are just going along in our current state, minding our own business, totally fine. Then a change is implemented. And the minute that change is implemented, and that can be a system change, a process change, it can be an organizational change, such as when we change HR departments. I worked on a large organizational change where we moved from everybody in 13 states being an HR generalist to HR business process or business partner model, where we had 8 HR business partners, and we had then about 7 centers of excellence. And so the business partner was the linchpin who was working with the business, and they were working with the different centers of excellence. So any type of change that we're doing, even a pandemic, an unplanned change, the moment that change is implemented, we go into a transition state. And that transition state is very unstable because it's a transition, right? We are not in the future state yet. We don't know where we are, and we can't go back to the current state. So when we have effective change management, we know that we have higher likelihood of change adoption and benefits realization. And benefits realization is key. Without benefits, there's no reason to change, unless you're in a pandemic where you have an unplanned change. But without change management, we know there's no guarantee of successful change adoption or benefit realization. And what I want to show you here is that when we have change management, the change is adopted more quickly. People arrive at this future state, and we start to realize the benefits of the change. When people are not assisted through the change process, through the change transition with change management tools, then what happens is they sometimes fall into this pit, and we call this the valley of despair. And this is because it's too late to go back. You cannot get back to the current state. It's gone. It does not exist. And we don't know how to go forward to get to the future state and realize the benefit of the change. And you can see the difference in terms of time that it takes for somebody who has change management to adopt change than when there is no change management effort, and it takes much longer for people to adopt and make it to the future state. And many times people do. I have had some project managers say, people should just do it. It's not let's not hold their hand. I mean, this is their job, just do it. I have had that conversation with some PMO leaders, and yet we know for a fact that this is so much more expensive to let people hang out here. And it's not only more expensive in terms of like how much longer it takes to start to see the benefit of the change. It's very expensive in terms of human cost of turnover. When we have our folks, when we have high turnover because people are struggling out here in this transition state, it costs a lot of money to replace those folks and to move forward. So when we're thinking about developing, our OCM power skills of, organizational change management, one of the reasons I think it's very important for project management professionals to do so is because you really work on some interesting projects. There's a lot of career longevity in organizational change management because it is one field that that won't go away. In fact, is actually expanding. The Association of Change Management Professionals in the past year has added more members than we had at the end of 2019. So within 1 year, we doubled our membership because people are so sure that being involved as an organizational change management professional in a project is what projects need. And so there's career longevity, and you earn more as well because it is a specialization. So the first piece, and I have the book Ready, Set, Change, and in the book I talk about putting together a framework to lead organizational change. And the first step, the first piece of that framework is to identify the relevant and relatable story of the change. So we want to share the story of the change with the people who will be going through this change. And I like this quotation from Abraham Lincoln: "In order to win a man to your cause, you must first reach his heart, the great high road to his reason." And the reason I like this is because this is the crux of sharing the story in a relevant and relatable way. When we appeal to people's emotions, when we appeal to their heart, and we capture their heart and their emotions, we don't have to work hard to capture them in terms of reason. It is the road to their reason. So I think this is an incredibly important piece because as project professionals, I know, and I have done this myself, that many times we speak to our end users and stakeholders and end users are interchangeable. End users are always stakeholders, but stakeholders are not always end users. But when we speak to our stakeholders and our end users and we tell them bullet points, right? Like bullet points such as we're integrating multifunctional systems. That doesn't mean anything to anybody. That's not the story of the change, right? We're just giving them bullet points or facts. We want to tell them a reason why they should care. And we want to appeal to their heart so that their logic can get on board as well. So many times we try to appeal logically first, don't we? We try to appeal to someone's factual, logical, rational reasoning as opposed to capturing them with a story and then leading them in terms of the logic and the reason. So let me give you an example of this. When I was, as I had mentioned, the first project I worked on in an organizational change management capacity was for the University of Michigan. And when I worked with the University of Michigan, I was there because we, at that time, this was about 20 years ago, and at that time, we did not have any sort of a enterprise system. We need to put in an ERP, and we were implementing PeopleSoft. If any of you remember PeopleSoft, you might remember PeopleSoft days. And U of M was the beta school for the student implementation of PeopleSoft. Now, what was interesting, we were implementing not just student, but we're doing HR and finance and space management and one more that I can't think of at the moment. But the reason the student piece was so incredibly important was that we had no way for the 23 schools and colleges and other academic units to communicate about students. So for example, we had 23 schools and colleges and units, academic units in addition to those. If I were in the law school and I had a student of mine taking a class in the College of Literature, Arts and Sciences, Literature, Science and Arts, LS&A. If I had a student in LS&A, I couldn't in the law school see what my student was doing at LS&A. I couldn't see any of it because we had 23 schools and colleges with individual databases that they built, as well as the academic units all had their own databases. And while I loved my individual database because I built it, it was not capable of communicating with other systems. So I had to log out of my law school system. I would have to log into the LS&A system. I'd have to find my student, copy on the clipboard, copy their record, save it, go back into my system and paste it. And that's how I was tracking my students. There was no way for everybody to get what they needed. And so the way that we had to do this was we had a big sheet of paper on the wall in every office that gave the names and passwords for those databases to be able to go find your students, which was super secure. So the thing that we decided to do was, put in this ERP system. And I got there late. They had 2 meetings with, yeah, that's all the thing we all did. Yes, I agree with you. We had a couple of meetings with this linchpin group. I had just gotten on the project, and this linchpin group was called our Change Liaison Network. This group was so incredibly important. It was somebody who could make decisions and also knew how the work was done from every single academic unit, school, college, and academic units. So we had all these folks and we were coming together, and my boss, Stacy, who hired me, she was super technical, and she used to put this slide up on the wall for all these people. And she would say, we are building a relational database, and this is very important. You have to do this. And they would just like roll their eyes.
Oh dear, did we lose April while she was rolling her eyes?
That's a very long example of rolling your eyes. Is the moral of
I had
the, is
two
the moral of the
little
story,
daughters.
don't roll your eyes?
They might get stuck that way.
Please don't roll
Zoom, I didn't know Zoom can detect emotions.
these two little girls, Violet May and Emma Rose. They were 3 and 1. Oh, you lost me?
Yeah, we
Now you're back.
lost you.
Wow, but when you said the eye roll thing, you froze.
Oh no, I hope
So
I
you
wasn't
froze.
rolling
You
my eyes.
said your face was stuck like that.
Perfect. So let me back you up. So we could not get this group together, right? We could not get this liaison group to understand what we're talking about. We're about to go under because we cannot get them on board. And there's a lot of pressure from everyone. So I had my two little daughters, Violet May and Emma Rose. They were 1 and 3 years old. And at the time I had to go and do all my errands on Saturdays because I was at work all week. And I was so frustrated because I would take those kids and I would have to go to the grocery store. I'd have to go to the hardware store. I'd have to go to the pharmacy. I'd have to go to the bank. Sometimes I had to get shoes or toys or clothes. And every single time I went to a store, I had to do that car seat thing, right? Snap, snap, click, click, snap, 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 click, click, snap, snap, putting the kids in and out of the car seats. And I don't know how many of you remember these days, or if you're still in these days. And if you're still in these days, you know, my heart goes out to you. But putting the kids in and out of the car seats to go in and out of the stores was driving me crazy. And I was complaining about it to someone at work. And this woman said, well, you know, they just built a new store by your house. You should probably go check it out. It's like 15 miles away, which was kind of far. But the next weekend, I put those girls in the car seats. I was so frustrated. And I drove over to the new store, which was Walmart. And when I got the kids out of the car seats, I put them in the cart and I took them into the store and I could not believe it. I mean, they had everything that I needed in that store. They had a grocery store, they had a hardware store, they had a pharmacy and a bank and shoes and even a Subway sandwich shop to keep those kids happy. And they sat there, ate their sandwiches. I got everything I needed and checked out and put them back in those car seats and went home. And I saved hours of time. So I thought, this is what we need to tell the liaisons. And I went to work the next day and I said, Stacy, we can tell those change liaisons that we're building them a Walmart. And I explained it. And she said, well, that's cute, but I'm not going to tell our change liaisons we're building a Walmart. So I knew, okay. I went the next day. We had our meeting with our liaisons and Stacy said, we are building a relational database. This is very important. It's a one-stop place for you to get all the data you need about students. And they got up to leave. And she looked at them and she said, have you ever heard of Walmart? April's going to tell you about Walmart. And I did. I told them about going in and out of the car seats and how I went to Walmart and I took the kids out once, went in, got everything I needed, came out, was done. And that's what we were trying to create. And they just said, oh, well, why didn't you say so? Like, of course we want that. That's what we want. Like, yes, we want Walmart. And from that point on, we had this very important, very active change group. They were phenomenal. In fact, that group is still in existence and they still talk to each other that way. About 15 years ago, we were doing an upgrade. And I remember hearing one of them say, well, don't do that. We're going to lose the Walmart. Because they feel like they understand having everything under one roof and in one place to go get and come out. And that was so helpful to that group. So that was a real learning moment for me about, you know, how important that story is. That has to be relevant and relatable. It must be relevant and relatable And it must be an important story that they can relate to so that they understand the importance of the change. It's important that we share that story frequently and early and often. So the old thinking was that with marketing, we would say we had to share a 7 times message. But we'd say 7 times we have to share a message. Can you hear me still? I'm getting a note. I'm unstable. Okay. Just Ron. We know that we used to say 7 times. Well, now the most recent Gallup report on the state of the American workplace says we need 9 to 16 before we even know it's about us, before we even understand this is something we should attend to or pay attention to. And that's just because there's so much noise in the marketplace. So we can never communicate too soon of leaders because they want to wait, you know. I'll go to communicate out about something. They say, wait, it doesn't happen for a year. Don't tell anybody yet. Well, people need to know, even though it's a year out, if I'm going to get 9 to 16 exposures to them, I need to start now, letting them know that something's happening. And then we don't have to know everything all at once. We don't have to be aware of everything to be able to communicate that something's coming. You know, sometimes we think that we cannot, we think that we have to have all the details. We have to have everything in place before we can communicate. But people are happy to have communication no matter what. They want to know, they want to hear about what it is that's coming and what will impact them and how. There's also in the Ready, Set, Change model, the second kind of piece of this model, the second approach, or the second step, I would say, and if you have these 5 pieces, it's really important. You'll be much more successful. Is that strong leadership, as we know, is a really key component of project success, and PMI recognizes that strong sponsorship with a visible and active sponsor is incredibly important in the success of projects. So how we engage leaders matters. We want to align those leaders and the stakeholders with tools so that they're able to develop their own competencies, so they're able to help themselves. And I think sometimes as organizational change professionals, and I know as project professionals, we sometimes think the sponsor knows what to do, that they know how to lead the change. But I have found in my experience, they don't always know what to do. They're not always sure how to be effective as a sponsor. And so we need to reach out and to help them in that way. I had a sponsor 4 years ago now on a financials project, large enterprise financials change project. And she told me she was too busy to meet with me every week and that she would see me at the project meetings. And I said, okay, I understand. So, you know, I'm going to projects meetings about three meetings in, which is 3 weeks. And I haven't seen her at the project meetings. I've seen a lot of her, you know, deputies and proxies, but I haven't seen her. And at the same time, I'm kind of thinking to myself, you know, she's a terrible sponsor. Like, she has not done anything yet. And then it starts to really dawn on me that the reason she's such a terrible sponsor is because she doesn't know what to do. She has no idea what she's supposed to be doing as a sponsor. So the first thing I did was I told her I needed to meet with her 15 minutes a week. And I said, I just have to have 15 minutes a week. It's a non-negotiable at this point. So then I created this tool that you see here, the Engaging Leaders Brief. And I created this tool to be delivered in 15 minutes. And I put her name up top. I would put the benefit of the change. So in this case, we were taking all these many decentralized accounts and pulling them back together to allow the accounting team to allocate where funds were coming from instead of relying on the business users who were kind of guessing which funds they should be using and kind of screwing up all the accounting. So, so I wanted to make sure that we had a good, relatable story. We were talking about a centralized piggy bank so that, you know, we could get the money, the business could get the money they needed, and all of the accounting would be done beneath the piggy bank. So it was in the right place and you could get what you needed when you needed it without having to become an accountant yourself, essentially. So I put that benefit of the change here. And then what I did was I gave her three or four, but mostly 3 bullet points. Here's communication going out this week. We're going to send an you know, statewide message. We're putting something in the newsletter, and we're sending out a message to your leadership, right? So I give her the 3 bullet points of communication coming out this week, and I give her 3 bullet points of communication coming out the following week. Then, oops, yeah. Do you want me to move myself? I'm covering, wait, hold on. I can do this. There you go. How's that? And then I would give her activities this week. These are things I needed her to go do. So I gave her activities this week, such as attend the town hall meeting on Wednesday, you know, meet with the Department of Transportation, whatever it was that I wanted her to do in terms of activities, and activities next week, 3 or 4. And then I give her keep your eye on and celebrate. So keep your eye on was just, this was not a risk register. This was more of like, I have a hunch. Keep your eye on the fact that, you know, Secretary of State's office is asking us if we'll share all our training. I don't know if that's okay. I don't know if it's okay with you because you're paying for all of it, you know. And then things we should celebrate, like a birthday, a retirement, a sprint completion, product review, you name it, something that needed to be done. But because all these bullets were completely filled out and I got her familiar with this format, I would say, here's the communication this week. It has the 3 communication next week. Now, if she wanted those communications, I could send them to her, but many times she just wanted to know that we were sending these things out. Activities, and then our kind of keep your eye on and celebrate. And then the one key message for the week that I wanted her to repeat. I wanted her to have one key message so we were not constantly confusing people. And that made a huge difference. So when we started using this tool, where we just quickly go through this, she started to become a very good sponsor. And it's, if I can turn on my video, sorry, I'm trying to read these. Oh, I'll turn it, okay. So she became quite a good sponsor. And when she became a good sponsor, the project started to be more successful. And she started to get really excited about the impact she was having on the project. And she didn't even know she was going to have an impact on the project. In her mind, I think she thought she was just supposed to sort of fund the project. But by seeing the things that we were talking about, things she needed to do, and things that were going on around the project, it really helped her. In fact, I remember I went to a conference. It was about, I don't know, 2.5 hours away from the office, and drove out to this conference, got there to present about this financials project, and she's sitting there at one of the tables. And I said, "What are you doing here?" And she said, "Well, it was on my sheet." It was on my sheet. So I came. So I felt like, you know, she really had a meeting of the minds there, because she could absolutely see the value in being engaged and leading the change. She knew what to do to lead it. So does anybody want to jump in? Do you have any questions? I don't want to just keep talking at you. If you'd like to, if you have questions, feel free. You can put in the chat that you have a question. I can stop and we can turn on your microphone, or you can just unmute yourself.
Hi, it's Valerie. I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So at first, your sponsor did not want to give the 15 minutes. thought that was like a really big time commitment. As her engagement grew, was it easier to get time? How did that pan out?
It was easier to get time. Well, she did. it wasn't even the 15 minutes she couldn't say no to. I think when I told her I needed a weekly meeting, she, I think, instinctively thought she needed to give me an hour. And
Yeah.
I didn't
Don't
just
need an
say-
hour.
Yeah, I just said, well, I just need a weekly meeting. And she was like, well, I'll see you at the project meetings. Right. And I'm thinking, well, project meetings are an hour and I'm sure I'll have time to talk to her then. But she didn't come. So that's when, like, out of desperation, I just went and said, I need 15 minutes. I didn't want to ask her even for a half an hour because I thought she would say no. So I thought I could do this in 15 minutes if I have the right tool. And that's when I built the tool for her. And it really had a big impact.
Okay, that's good guidance. Thanks.
Hey, April.
Yeah.
I want to get your thoughts on something. You mentioned about, appealing to the emotion of people, right? As you know, there are different personality types. Some of them are driven more by quantitative reasoning. Some of them are, more creative, etc. This emotional appeal, is that uniform or universal across all of these personality types? And I keep thinking about all of these, what our political parties do as well these days. And, they appeal to the emotion, whether you're left, right, whatever, right? And, in change management, does the personality type of the sponsor or the key stakeholder, does that matter when you're appealing to the emotions?
Well, I think that's, I hear you trying to draw me into a political discussion, which no thanks. But what I think is, I understand what you're saying about the different types, and yes, like I have used many different types of personality assessments and tools. But what I think is what we're trying to capture is something that's relevant and relatable. So if you think about those unit liaison folks, right? We're at a Big Ten university. I don't know if you noticed that picture I had, but it was many women. Our audience was probably 80% women. So I know that women who are in the ages of between 25 and 65 have probably had experience with car seats, have probably had experience either with their own children or somebody else's children, getting them in and out of the car seats. That's a relevant and relatable story. So when I can talk to them about, here you have to get in and out of the car seats all these times to get the kids in and out of all these stores, or you can go to one store, get them out of the car seat, get everything you need, put them back in. And I can relate those two ideas to the idea of having to go in and out of these different databases over and over all day versus going into one database and coming back out of one database. It's relevant because of the demographics of my audience, right? Women age 25 to 65 and men too. But back then, 20 years ago, a lot, not quite as many dads were getting kids out of car seats as much. But I'm also thinking about, this is very relatable. This is something that most people have had to do. And when I'm looking for a story for a change, when I'm thinking about like a global story for a change, one of the things I'm thinking about is I'm thinking about what are the relatable moments that we all share, right? We've all been born. We've all had some sort of parental figure. We've all probably gone to some school of some type. And so there's like universal human themes. You can also look at Joseph Campbell, and you can look at different archetypes and different archetypal stories of the hero's journey. And when you think about crafting or drafting and kind of thinking about like, how do I get the right story for the change? You may need many stories for your change, and you may need many stories for different audiences. But I think the key is to kind of look at that audience and think, can this audience relate to this? I mean, if I'm talking to technical people, I'm not going to necessarily say, you know, well, for example, if I'm speaking to a group of engineers, I'm not going to say, well, you know, if you need to build a bridge, I think you just need to, like, you know, start building it, and you get in the middle, it probably all works out. I mean, engineers would be like, what? But if I was talking to a group of second graders, I probably would use that kind of language. So we want to think about the audience and what they can relate to. What is it they already know that I can tell them a story about? A lot of times I'll think about Disney movies. It's great. It's telling stories, and they take stories and they reuse them, they rework them. And I'll just kind of have a story in my mind, and I'll try it out. And if it resonates, great. And if it doesn't resonate, I move on and try a different story. But I think that different audiences need different stories, but the key is to try to get something that they can relate to and feels relevant to what you're speaking about. Does that help?
Yes, it does. I agree completely. Relating to someone, and having that story is extremely important. But I was just thinking in terms of the emotional appeal as well. So yeah, maybe I'm taking it a little too far in terms of the analysis.
Yeah, I think at some point you have to, like, sort of almost do like a mashup, like you know, oh, it's like if the Three Stooges went and did this, right? Where you're taking two television shows and putting them together, or two movies and kind of mashing them together and telling that story, so that it's easy for the audience to kind of go, oh, okay, that makes sense. Oh yeah, I see why we would do that, as opposed to all this technical talk that we sometimes have, because we have bullet points from our vendors, or we create the bullet points ourselves, and we're saying, talking in very high level technical language about integrated support, and people are like, what does that mean exactly? So I think the more we can speak simply in relevant and relatable way, the better.
Yeah, thank you, April.
You're welcome. So in terms of thinking about of organizational change in an agile way, I think recognizing that we have to be flexible and adaptive and iterative is incredibly important. And here I've got my lovely tech talk, my iterative and integrated support, but really that just means that we are continuing to refine what we're doing, and we're continuing to integrate support of our end users and stakeholders as we refine it. And we want a simple and fast approach to help individuals and organizations adapt change. And when we're thinking about, doing a replay, we want to replay and we want to revisit until our business objectives are met, not just our technical objectives, but the business objectives, because the business objectives usually are more complex in the sense that there's human beings involved, and we need them to adopt that change. And right now I'm on a project where our technical team, they're so fast, and they can just, they amaze me. They can just do anything. And yet, I'm on the business side for the client, and I'm like, well, people need a little bit more guidance. We need a little bit more time. People are slow. I think Stephen Covey used to say that people are slow. Technology is fast and people are slow. And that's still true. So one of the people recognize and respect resistance. It's going to be there. It does exist, and we should be ready for it. There should be no reason that we can reduce it. And when I say plan to address resistance by reiterating the why, we have to always kind of loop back to the reason for that change. There's no reason to change unless it's an unplanned change like a pandemic. So that was not a change where we could say, there's something good on the other side of this. We couldn't. That change was unplanned, unknown. But the changes that most of us are involved in, you know, programmatic changes, organizational changes, system changes, we do have a benefit of the change. We do know that there's a benefit, and we have to keep talking about that benefit, because if we don't know the benefit of the change, why are we doing it? If we can't describe it, we can't support it. So it has to be stated. So we have this plan to address the resistance by reiterating the why. And this is what I want to show you. And I'm going to jump off of the slide for a minute, just because I want to have a little bit more space here. And Gopal, this is what I wanted to show you this, because I think this is very similar to what you were talking about in terms of the personality types. So I wanted to show you 4 personality types responses of resistance. So we have these 4 types that I see all the time on projects. We have that person who is the commander. That's the leader who promotes and supports the change. We have that person who is a socializer. And this is somebody who's a social connector who promotes and gains social acceptance of the change. We have an understander, and our understander provides a lot of stability in the organization, and they truly enjoy understanding how things work, and they want to make sure that they understand for other people how things work. And then we have a detailer, and the detailer always wants a lot of detailed information so that they can deeply understand and analyze the importance of the change and how it's going to impact stakeholders and how it's going to impact end users. So these are their strengths when they're at the best. But sometimes things happen and they become resistant. And in that case, the commander will become a fighter who actively fights against the team and actively speaks out against the change. And if you've ever had a commander turn around and become a fighter on you, you know what this is like. It's so miserable, because they have been promoters until that point. I'll tell you about this commander in just a moment. We also have our socializer can become a saboteur. And the saboteur subtly sabotages change through sarcasm and negative comments. They might be the eye roller. Oh yes, we're going through the change, you know, and they act like they're supporting the change, but they're actively working against you or against the team. Many times we have the underminer, and that's somebody who undermines the change by just not engaging with the change and by telling other people they don't plan to adopt it. And then we have the derailer. The derailer will stall and delay if they don't have enough information, if they don't think they have enough information. And a lot of times they'll create additional requirements or extra work for people because they want so much data, and they want so much data that sometimes they become, you know, have that analysis paralysis where they cannot decide anything because they have so much information and it gets stuck in the derailer. So that's when these folks become resistant. This is how they tend to become resistant. But we can change, we can assist them by, oh, I'm sorry, I'm reading comments because it's covering my screen here. We can assist them because the commanders, if we keep them up to date with the most important information and we give them clear stories of the change, we can keep that commander from slipping into resistance. We can keep them with us, working for us, supporting the change rather than working against us. And I'll give you an example of this. I had an EMR project I was working on, which is electronic medical record, or EHR, electronic health record. I was working on EMR implementation. Oops, I'm sorry. And we were partially implemented, meaning that all of our clinics had implemented the system. Our physicians were using their laptops and tablets to see patients, but we had an alert problem. We had the tolerance for our alerts on the system was set too low, and it required a project to be able to reset it. And we asked our commander, who had been a terrific supporter for us, we asked our commander to go to the executive committee and ask for approval to get this alert project started. And I'll tell you the reason it was so critically important was because these were alerts that the physician was getting in their system as they were seeing a patient. So let's say a physician comes into the room to see you and they're using their laptop or their tablet, and they see an alert that says patient's weight has not been recorded, and they hit dismiss. Patient's height has not been recorded, hit dismiss. Address needs to be updated, hit dismiss. Patient's overdue for a flu vaccine, hit dismiss. And they start to hit dismiss and they get what's called alert fatigue, where they start to not read the alerts any longer. So maybe halfway through your visit, there's an important alert like this patient is allergic to this prescription, and they hit dismiss. Or this is contraindicated for something on the problem list, and they hit dismiss. And when they do that, it's very dangerous, right? So my commander came back twice from the executive committee meeting and said, I'm not going to help you anymore. I cannot get approval for this, and I look like a jerk because I can't explain it in a way that makes any sense to them. And I'm really frustrated, and we're just, you guys are going to have to figure something else out. So I thought about, like, what's going on with him? Like, he's fighting against the team. Like, he was fighting our team. And so I sat with him and I said, have you ever heard of the story of the boy who cried wolf? And then I told him the story, and I don't know if you remember the story, but the old story of the boy who cried wolf, I think it's an Aesop's Fable. And the boy who cried wolf was a shepherd boy, and he was watching his flock as he did every single day. And one day he was out there looking at his flock of sheep, and he was just bored. And he thought, I wonder what's going to happen if I yell wolf sometime. And he decided to do it. And he yelled, wolf, wolf, wolf. And all the townspeople came running with their shotguns and their shovels. And they said, where's the wolf? And the boy's like, I ran away. Okay. Cool. And this is really boring. I think I'll do it again. And he does. He yells, wolf, wolf, wolf. And they all come running again with their shotguns and shovels. And they're like, where's the wolf? And at that point, he's like, oh, there was no wolf. I was just bored. And they said, don't do that again. And he said, all right. And the next day, of course, he goes out and he's watching his flock. And you know how the story goes. Just bored. But suddenly, a couple of wolves come running out and they start to chew up the flock, and they take over the entire flock. They're killing all of the sheep, and the boy cries, wolf, 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 real wolves, real. And nobody comes. And they don't come because they have heard him cry wolf over and over, and they no longer believe him. So I told this to our commander. I said, I don't know how you can use the story, but talk to your executive team so that they understand the story and what's at stake here, because we're going to cause harm. And he did. He went back to the executive committee and he was able to communicate with them what was at stake and why this was critically important, and was able to get approval to move forward on the project. So when we keep people with fresh stories and ideas and information to be able to move things forward, our commanders, they'll stay on our side. If we start to dry up on the information, or we don't explain things in a way that's relevant or relatable or understandable, then we lose them and they start to fight against us. With our socializers, it's really important to keep them engaged, and sometimes we have to put them on committees and make them part of a group that's inviting other people to things, and help them stay engaged with the project and needed and wanted, so that they don't kind of start to backstab us a little bit. They need to feel like they're very involved with the communication. With our understanders who become underminers if they're not dealt with, we have to provide a lot of opportunities to try change for them. So I want to make sure that they have a way to provide input. Maybe I put them, as a part of a product review group, or help them, ask them to be a UAT tester, whatever I can do to encourage them to come in and understand the system. And then with my detailers, who sometimes become derailers, I want to schedule time for them to meet with us. And I want to provide an agenda for them so they have enough time to think. And we have to give them firm deadlines. This cannot go on. We can't let them wreck the schedule with their need for detail. So we have to give firm deadlines and make sure they understand those deadlines. And then thinking about this end user and stakeholder advocacy role, we want to have that organizational change management mindset in support of people. So ensuring that we have training and a good solid help desk that's been trained, and that we have a command center, which is incredibly important. And sometimes we get a little cavalier about supporting our command centers. And then post go live learning, all of these pieces really make a big difference to our end users and stakeholders. And we have to advocate for them when we see something's going off the rails, or that a technical problem is being solved with a business process fix instead of the technical fix that it needs. We need to step forward and advocate for the end users, because they don't have somebody generally to advocate for them. They don't have the project manager who's looking at that schedule, the technical team who's looking at the technical requirements. They need a change management professional to say, stakeholders can't do that, end users can't do that, right? And I have seen on that financials project I told you about, it was very frustrating in the sense that the technical team couldn't figure out a way to take the old account number and make it into the new account number. Technically, they couldn't figure out a way in the system to enter the old number and have it translate into the new number. So what we ended up having to do was have the business users, the end users, go to a website with an Excel table and type in the old number, and it would spit out a new number. And it just seemed so frustrating that they would have to stop in the middle of their business process, go to a website, use an Excel table, get a number, and then go back and start working again. But it was a lack of recognition of the importance of a smooth business process for them. So when we think about sharing the story, relevant and relatable, engaging our leaders, being flexible, adaptable, and adaptive and iterative, and recognize and respect and reduce resistance. That's the organizational change management mindset. We want to have this kind of holistic piece where everything is coming together so that we can help our stakeholders and end users with their mindset shift. So in terms of a mission, I think it's really incredibly important to develop the power skill of change management so that we can lead successful change. I also want to recognize that organizations, we talk about organizational change management, organizations are made up of individuals, and organizational change is the result of individual change, which requires mindset change. So when we're trying to drive change by ensuring individuals and organizations adopt and sustain the change, we're really appealing to the change in mindset and habits. And I find that to be so one of the more difficult pieces of change management is that so many times we have work habits that are very deeply ingrained. And now when we have a business process change, those work habits all change as well. And so that habit formation is a difficult piece for some. And I do have to say that there's different levels of difficulty, right? The financials project that I had mentioned earlier, I know you won't believe this. This was only in 2017, but they were using green screen computers and function keys. Remember, like F10, F10, F4. There's no 10, F9, F9, F4. And they were using function keys and a green screen. But it was a very physical sort of experience for them, right? Like people had their tab and function keys memorized, and they'd go enter, 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 return, 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 like 3 times. Then they go tab, 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 F7, and they'd enter data. When we switched them to a GUI system where they had that was menu driven, and they couldn't use they didn't know what their hotkeys were. They didn't understand that they had some menu shortcuts in there, but they were really used to that lovely, like physical feeling of their green screen. They missed it. They had a really difficult time just with the physical change of touching the keyboard, having to look at the screen, having to figure out where to enter data. So sometimes we don't even think of that. Like the habit the physical habit of what we do at work sometimes is a real barrier to change as well. So when you think about those power skills, we're talking about sharing the story, relevant, relatable story of the change, engaging leaders and sponsors, flexible, adaptive, and iterative behavior, recognizing, respecting, reducing resistance, and then developing the OCM mindset so that we can support people. And I just wanted to show you this. This was a gentleman called Neil, Magsambal. Does anybody know Neil? It looks like it's spelled wrong, but that's how he spells his name. He was talking about the cross-functional T-shaped skills, skills that are broad and skills that are deep, and how project leaders and agilists should be T-shaped also, which I thought this was interesting. I just wanted to, I'm going to skip past Roger Wolkoff here, but I'm going to talk about sharing the relative and relatable story of the change encourages flexibility and adaptability. Neil Allen, Christina said. But to sustain our organizational change is really the goal. And so we have to make sure that we're putting all these pieces into place around resistance and reiterating the why of change, and then supporting people through that development of the OCM mindset and the adoption of new habits and new behaviors and new ways of thinking. So I was thinking of doing breakout rooms, and we can do that if we'd like to do that, or we can just all talk together about how you'd like to, integrate this organizational change management into your own skill set. And I didn't save my change. I had changed that to October 24th. I was thinking 90 days out, I guess it's August now, isn't it? I'm like losing track of the time, but it would be great to talk together. Yeah, let's all talk together. What would you like to add to your own skill set of organizational change management skills? You can go ahead and unmute. We can chat.
Yeah, boy, I'd like to add recognition of those four leadership types turning into the skill set types with some skills for avoiding that. That's really interesting.
I like that.
The idea of storytelling really resonates with me because I believe that people are selfish and they're looking into what is there for me. And if you could tell a compelling story so that it's interesting, I could, it really gives me something, like you gave an example of Walmart. I think it would be a skill set that I would like to add to my tool belt.
April, the canvas that you use for the conversation with that leader looks like it'll be a very useful and practical technique and tool. And also to make the idea of making sure to time bound it in some sort of small increment makes a heck of a lot of sense when you're dealing with a sponsor.
Yeah, I felt like I stumbled onto a secret recipe when I created that. I mean, it
Yeah.
just seemed like, I'll have to tell you this too. This is interesting. I have a change management course that I teach, and one of the women in my course was from
You went away, April.
Rose.
out. She showed her boss, and they said she's in the UK, and they turned around and said all documents that go to this boss have to look like this.
It's Valerie. I've been a change practitioner for some time.
Great.
And what I am working on now is how to adopt change methods that were really tightly aligned with waterfall to agile settings, and especially the iterative way that we deliver work in agile. So that's my challenge of the year.
I missed 2 words in the middle of your sentence. You froze on my end.
Oh, okay. I was saying I am working to adopt. So I've been changing ProSci and some other methods that are really aligned to waterfall. And so what I'm working on this year is how to adopt those to agile delivery like Scrum and SAFe.
I have been trained in ProSci, and I agree with your assessment of very waterfall focused and also incredibly tool heavy. And that's why I wanted to create a 5-step framework. The Ready, Set, Change framework has 5 steps in it. It's a little bit different, but it's got 5 steps. And when you do those 5 steps, you lead change very successfully. You don't have to do 95 tools and templates and stand on your head and whistle.
Yeah.
Excellent. I like that. Thanks, Valerie.
So Sasha was noting the value of storytelling, this value of storytelling. So I want to recommend another book. So I definitely want to look at yours, April, but another book specifically on storytelling. It's a book called Leading Out Loud by Terry Pierce. And Terry was a leadership consultant who wrote that book, and he was brought in as a senior vice president at Schwab while I was there, and the coach for Chuck Schwab and Dave Patrick and Beth Sowie and Gideon Sasson and a number of other people. And that book talks about creating stories. So our CIO, Don Lepore, would, I can still remember a story she told 20 years ago of being up on stage talking to 2,000 people. And she would talk about, she had a baby a year before and going on a website, and this is 2001, going on a website to buy something for her baby and walking through the process of buying this thing with someone on the other end, and their system crashed right before her order got taken in. And she used it and we have to, here at Schwab, have systems that, and she talked about how empathetic she was with this person on the other end of the phone. And that's, those stories that we tell from our own lives. And I think that story of Walmart was from your life, April. It was part of why it resonated so much, was it was your story. And Dawn's stories were her stories, and Chuck's stories were his stories. And they're just so, and the Leading Out Loud book, and it got turned into a class by the Tom Peters organization, that was very, very powerful for me, very, very transformational as a leader for me.
Nice. Well, I completely agree with you. I mean, I think personal stories make a huge difference. One of the things that I work with also is on reducing negativity in organizations. So I teach workshops as well. And I have a story of a gentleman I worked with who was an accountant for many years. And, when I tell people that story, I find that even 10 years later, they'll say to me, like, I still remember that, and I agree. Very powerful. And I like having that book. It's Terry Pierce. Is that the last?
No, yeah,
Okay.
P-E-A-R-C-E, I believe.
I think it's been added to the chat. So that's excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Jay. So thank you, April. So one of the things I would like to share is, in my experience, in my humble opinion, change management, all these things you talked about has nothing to do with waterfall or agile. This has to do with people and how we deal with the issue of change of every individual in the organization and the context and consolidation of those individuals within different business units or groups that we work with, right? And I think those things we talk about, those resistance and resistors, that's going to happen. Change is hard for everybody, and when we come into an organization and think that we're going to have an agile transformation or digital transformation or have everyone adopt safe or less or whatever it is, right? If we don't account for the human equation in how we help every individual within the organization to change, then we're missing. We're missing the most vital equation of our responsibility and accountability, right? So
Yeah.
that's what I would like to say. A lot of people say, well, yes, can you do change management iteratively and incrementally and move away from ProC and other? Yes, of course you can, but I would argue that the fundamental equation of storytelling, the fundamental equation of empathy, the fundamental equation of allowing the human enterprise and of adoption to play out and coming up with strategies of how to deal with the resistance is critical. And I don't think it matters what type of agile or non-agile practices you engage in. So this is one of the big things I fundamentally find, that when we do agile transformations, if I look at Scrum, if I look at Safe and everything else, it's all great for software engineering. It's all great for certain practices that we're doing, and we are improving things, don't get me wrong. But the missing equation is the connectivity to organizational change and people. And how do we equate to people? So, I shouldn't say this. So I'm a software engineer at heart. Most software engineers don't really care about the people equation. Okay, that's not prominent on their mind, right? And rightfully so. They like doing what they like to do, right? So I think that's where we need experts or people that are interested in this to help us go along with this, how we adopt change and how we apply it and how we interleave the human equation into this, right? So that's just Jay Johnson's opinion, and I just wanted to share
it. If I may continue on that, I was also thinking when I saw the word agile and then OCM, I was thinking that in principle, change management is how to say agnostic to the process or framework used for any type of transformation. But then I was also thinking that maybe agile is referring to not the subject of change, but to the application or the process of change management. Whether you want to execute change management in a waterfall manner or in more iterative and incremental way. Like even those 4 responses that you, April, in one of the slides you presented. Under each of those categories, you might have tens of people in organization. Whether you want to engage all of them or maybe start iteratively one by one and go iteratively in a small increments. And also Another thing that you emphasized was the why of change. You said, hey, communicate the why of change. And that could be also subject to maybe not just iteratively do this, but also incrementally do. Whether you want to drop a bomb at one and scare out everybody, or whether you want to convey that message in smaller doses, digestible doses. I think these are the aspects that Agile makes sense to me. But as Jay said, the subject of the change could be anything, could be waterfall, could be Agile, could be just the two organizations are merging, or there is an acquisition of a business, or maybe, I don't know, new business model is launched or anything. April, without taking too much time, I'm very much interested in slide number 2. I think it was the second slide. And I think my question would be, what happens in that transition? You said, okay, there is some current state and there is some future state and there is a transition. Like, what happens in that transition? Like, obviously you would say that it depends, and these are not unique. These are unique processes depending on the context and organization.
Yes, I mean, in the transition, different people react differently. You know, some people are more comfortable than other people not knowing what's coming, but it's very individualized. I mean, I think about, if I think of, you know, I have 3 daughters. If I think about them, my oldest daughter, she is very comfortable with not knowing what's next. She regularly will fly to a different country and go work there for several months or a year and go study somewhere else. I mean, it's not a big deal to her. She's not anxious during transition. My middle daughter, when she was young, I had to tell her every single night what was coming the next day. I walked through an entire schedule with her. She was so anxious. She did not like to not know what was next. And my youngest daughter, you know, she's completely different from the other 2. She's not a free spirit flexible. She's not, you know, all worked up and anxious about not knowing what's next, but she likes very much to be very organized about what's coming. So just as our children, our colleagues, our spouses are different from each other, everybody in an organization is an individual. And so how people handle that transition is very individualized and very different. If I'm somebody who is really anxious when I don't know what's coming and we go into a big change, I'm anxious that entire time. And that's why it's so important to provide that change management pathway, right? The guide, the way to the future state, and show people through communicating with them and transition workshops and helping them to, you know, learn new skills and help them to identify, you know, how will this be different business process wise when I'm there, and how to, and then making sure they're trained and supported. And when we do those pieces and we take people through that path, they're much less anxious. Even if they're the type of person that needs to know everything that's coming next, they're able to relax if they see there's a plan and there's a path and we could take them through step by step. So it's very individualized, but that transition phase is extremely easy for some people. I'm a type of person that I just kind of go with, you know, very flexible. I'm happy to just move into the next phase of something, but there are other people who are very, very uncomfortable unless they know where they're headed, unless they feel like they have it mapped out for them and understand everything. So I hope that's answering that question for you.
I mean, it's very interesting, definitely. First of all, I agree that there is no specific answer. The reason I was, that slide intrigued me because right now we are implementing agile way of working in an organization, and that organization goes through changes. I was just thinking, what did we do? Like, without having any structured process or any conceptual model in place, what we did is we emphasized training. We did lots of training. What else we did was we used any outlets that we had or any forum like Tech Talks, town halls, for 5 minutes, maximum 8 minutes presentations. So we never went beyond 8 minutes, usually 3 to 5 minutes, and town halls, Tech Talks that we have every 2 weeks. So I'm just reflecting back that probably the two things that stands out in that transitional place was lots of training. We almost trained 300 plus people on that, what is Agile, and also used almost every forum, every platform to communicate. But again, we did not have this model that and I'm so happy that and now we know the model, the structure, those responses, 4 responses, and those 4. By the way, how you refer to those 4 components around the change mindset? Do you refer to them as 4 dimensions, 4 components of mindset, or 4 principles? I
Well,
probably
I've been thinking of them as the power skills of organizational change management. I'd love to also share with you sometime, and when you have another time on your calendar, I'd love to share the Ready, Set, Change model, which is the 5-step framework for really getting people through. Of course, the R is for that relevant and relatable story of change. But there are other pieces that are incorporated into what we've been talking about, but are very specifically toward that book. And I do have a free download that has that image of the 4 resistance responses. It has that grid in it, and so I'll put it in the chat here so you can download that, because if you download that, you'll get like the outline of the book, but also that grid and some additional detail.
I would love to follow up. Frankly, when I was watching it I was immediately thinking areas that we could collaborate, and Jay and myself, we could invite you to our enterprise, which is a pretty big enterprise and probably not too far from me. If you are Michigan based, we are not Central Time, but probably the driving distances. And I am like you, I also had one of my best projects with the university in Minnesota. So I also have lots of projects that I started with universities. So we would follow up, so without taking too much of the meetup time. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you. I'm sorry I dropped off for a few minutes. It started raining here, and my Starlink died. I had to go over to the phone.
So April.
Starlink? Anybody else have Starlink? Yes.
Yeah. So April. So is this like the Q&A time we're at?
Well, yes, I wanted to share with you this link, which I put in the chat. I also have Change Mastery 101. If anybody wants to pursue a CCMP, I have a course that is a qualified education provider course. And I also wanted to share, and I think it's not in here because I noticed I didn't save it. And but let me see if I can find it. But I noticed that every single time I have to upload the slides, they don't quite upload quite the same way. But let me see if I get to the next slide. I have one final slide. I probably can't get there, but yes, Q&A time, that's fine.
Yeah, so one thing I do want to mention to everyone, and I'm taking advantage of this. So all those who think PMI and Agile are at odds or discourse, I just want to let you know that PMI is changing significantly. With my friend that just joined, that created financial delivery from IBM. And I don't know if y'all noticed the latest PMI changes that they have now informed everybody, and the new PMBOK coming out is very agile. They're moving to more of an iterative, incremental approach, and they're changing their PMBOK significantly.
Is that Ambler and Lines? Is that what you're speaking of, Dad?
Yes. So yes, you know them. So I think them coming on board with PMI and them bringing in digital discipline Agile into the mix, and having them, you know, work with the leadership and organization there is influential. But I also think what's happening globally and the changes that are happening globally, that's moving from the, you know, I hate to say this, but the old project management mindset, which I've been involved in, you know, I've been doing this for like 40 years, and moving towards more of the Agile mindset is being adopted by the PMI. So I just wanted to point that out, that I'm seeing significant change there. So, but that does not mean that change management, all these things that April talked about, does not cross those domains. It does, right? So I just wanted to point that out. And Valerie, you have your hand up.
Yeah, if this is okay to start the questions now. I actually had 3 questions for April, and if there's not enough time, it's fine. Choose the one you think you can answer currently. So I'll just list them out there. So one is, what do you do when stakeholders are not aware of the change that's actually needed? They might either they're not aware or they misplace the identification of the need for change. And especially this often happens at leadership where they think, well, it's the team's fault, they're whatever. And that's what we need to change, when really maybe it's a process or whatever, or even the leader themselves. So that's question 1. Question 2, if you're not in a leadership position and you're managing up and you're trying to change, do you have any advice there? And 3, I listened to Esther Derby speak about, what was it, the 7 rules for positive change. And she talked about, you know, again, incremental experiments. And it made me think that although experiments are uncertain, you don't always know the results. If you have sort of a general layout of the experiments that you want to conduct, sort of a roadmap of experiments towards the change we want to achieve, do you have something like that?
I'm trying to remember the all 3 of them. So let me see where I can start for you. So in terms of experiments, I love the idea of experiments, and many times I'll call something an experiment, or I'll call it a pilot, even though, just because it gives you a little bit of flexibility in whatever it is. So currently I'm working on a project that is, it's a large project for the state of Michigan, where they will be able to, people will be able to, sorry, losing power. We have storms here right now. So luckily we're on my phone. But what we've seen at the state of Michigan, we're allowing people to access their own immunization records and print them, which doesn't sound like a huge change, but it's a relatively large change for DHHS, because we're allowing the public into something that's only been held for physicians, right? Like, that's a big shift. I've asked that we not do any kind of a formal big, hey, this is happening communication. We're doing a soft launch. Oh, you guys may not be able to see me because our power is going out, but we're doing a soft launch, and we're taking it as an experiment, because I think people are more receptive to it, and they're kinder to us when they're receptive to it. The other thing that we're doing is, so I do like that idea. I don't have necessarily a roadmap for it. In terms of managing up with leaders who are not changing, I think that's always a challenge, and I think helping them to have some exposure to organizational change management and providing them with support and your own sort of stories for them, positive stories to share with them about organizational change and how we can make it easier for people is welcome. And then the first question, can you remind me? I'm sorry, the power's gone out
when they're
3 times.
not aware of the change, right? Like either they don't know it, or they're misplacing what they think needs to be changed.
Well, I think not being aware of the change is completely due to lack of communication. And as I'm so sorry, I've forgotten. Oh, I know, it was Joseph. Is he still on? Oh, there he is. Okay, Joseph was talking about the TikTok, videos and the other short videos and these different types of messaging on platforms. Here's the truth. I mean, a lot of times, especially with release management, but many times people will say, oh, we'll just send an email about change. We'll just send an email. Like, that's an actual approach. Just send an email, right? With air quotes. Sending an email does nothing. It does nothing. We have to look at our audience. We have to look at all the places where they are communicated to and touched, and we have to communicate through that way. If stakeholders don't know that a change is coming, and I have had that experience myself where you walk in, you're like, what? Nobody mentioned this to us. We did not have communication. We didn't get the 9 to 16 touches. If we did get it, it was so convoluted that I didn't understand it was for me. This would happen to me. We have to be very clear and say it over and over again. Come next Monday, you will have a new payroll system. Pay attention to this. And we have to do it in multiple ways. We have to do it through videos and emails and posters and flyers and cartoons. Any way we can get that message out, I think, is key. But if we haven't gotten the message out, shame on us.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You guys might get like 10 more minutes of power.
April, while you were responding to Valeria, I was thinking that still I have that second slide in my mind, that transition, etc. I was just thinking that maybe people, they resist to change, not because they like to resist. Maybe there are some reasons. Maybe in that transition, those reasons should be identified and addressed. For example, if there is no clarity into what we are changing, that could naturally cause resistance. Or second thing, maybe an element that I can think from top of my head is, if people are not trained or provided trainings that look here into that change, we will train you, we will provide you with the skills, you will be not alone, you will be coached. That may be the second element. And the third element, maybe the most prominent of the three, would be, did we articulate the benefit, like why that change is good? Maybe if we put these three things, I'm not saying necessarily it should be only these three, I'm just thinking that out of the top of my head, maybe if these three things are very well conducted during that transition process, it might shorten that transition process, as well as make it those curves that you showed, two curves, will be more effective and shorter. Because you also mentioned something very important, I hope I memorized it correctly. You said, if that transition doesn't happen successfully, guess what? You can't just go back to the current state, because that current state is gone. You will not enter to that stable current state because you already made changes and twisted things, moved people probably around, moved resources. So now you are facing double threats. One threat that you didn't make the change. Second thing, that it is not just a button press that you can go back to the previous state. Thank you.
Yes, I totally agree. And I, you've identified so well those different reasons for resistance. And yes, it's not because people don't want to change. I find the number one reason is they don't understand why we're doing this. They just don't understand why. We haven't clearly stated a benefit. And when we don't give the benefit, it's tough for people to get on board. If they see the benefit, if they know a Walmart is easier to get in and out of than 6 stores with 2 car seats, if they know the benefit, they can get behind it. They can get excited, or they can at least recognize that this will be better later, which is very helpful. So great. I think Valerie raised her hand.
Yeah, I just had another thought that I think it might have been from the book Leading Exceptional Change or something like that. In any case, there was a study that said basically, if you tell people what's not going to change, they're more receptive to what will change. So do you intentionally incorporate that into your messaging, you know, the like weekly messages or whatever that goes out, so people can sort of, this is what's not changing, but and here's what's changing?
Yes, I think it is really important to talk about, you know, what will stay the same, what will stay the same, because people are anxious, and the more that we can reassure them and say, this is, you know, these are the pieces that won't be different. You will be recording your time differently, but you won't be, you know, receiving your check from a different source, right? Like you will still get paid. We'll make sure you get paid. I mean, that was a big one with our financials change, because nobody had mentioned this was a really interesting project. There was a statewide global 2 people change management team, but they didn't mention to anybody that the payroll system was changing. And so I came on from an agency side to assist kind of in the last, you know, 3 months of like, oh my gosh, this is about to go crazy, and you know, we need some extra hands. So I was at the agency level, and I started putting up posters at the elevator that said, your time card will change. The way you record your time is going to change, but your payroll won't change. Your money won't change, right? And I just started like putting up these posters that I was like making in my cubicle that day. I was just like frantic, you know, nobody had mentioned this to any of these users. And my agency had 14,000 end users. And I thought, how can you not tell 14,000 people that in 2 weeks the payroll system is changing? That's ridiculous. But we did what we could, and we had some hand-drawn paper and posters that said, hey, by the way, your payroll system is going to be different, but you will still get paid and you will still be fine.
I have one that if it's with a small, not a, you know, a large organization, but with a small organization, that you can let people know how they're part of the change, what their role is in the change, and then what their role looks like after the change, so they feel involved. I think a lot of times people are resistant to change because they feel like the rug has been pulled out from under them, and they don't know, why is this happening? How does this affect me? What do I have to learn? What do I lose? So making sure that they know they're part of this. They're part of that that new culture shift. I think that goes a long way.
I agree, Marie. That's nice. Nice point. Excellent point.
Okay, everyone. So it is now, I'm putting on my Scrum Master hat. So I'm, you know, we're coming to the end of our time, and I want to thank everyone for participating. This will be recorded and sent out to everyone. And if April can send me her deck, I'll post that as well. And I want to thank April so much for joining. And agreeing to come here and talk to us and educate us. So thank you, April, very much. It was very, very rewarding. Thank you. We'll probably have more follow-up with you, of course, as we broadcast this, and I'm sure Joseph and I will want to talk to you more, which is cool. But again, thank you, everyone. Our next speaker coming up is Sally, and she'll be talking about business agility or something. I can't remember, Ron.
The metrics about how do we measure business agility, and the metrics and the KPIs we use for business agility, Jay.
Should be great.
Yeah. And that's very dynamic today, and full of interesting conversation. So that's coming up next. But April, again, thank you so much. And I want to thank everyone else for attending. And I would like to say at this point in time, sayonara. Thank you very much. And we'll
Yes.
talk to everyone again. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
y'all. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Yes.